Laura.
Just messed up our intro. Sorry. By our pod, I mean on Wednesdays we read, where we do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. We have already introduced ourselves, and I'm a little bit loosey goosey today because
Mhm.
usually we do that, but today we are three
Three
friends
best friends
because we welcome to the pod K.E. Andrews. Welcome back.
again.
Yes, thank you so much for having me again.
K.E. Andrews is the one of our wonderful indie mission winners. We
Mhm.
read The Assassin of Grins and Secrets, and she was on to discuss that. And today
Yes.
we will be doing a discussion of Hills of Heather and Bone. Uh,
Yes. Which
I
is
would.
a SPIFBO 9 finalist.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
Congratulations. And
Yes.
we could see why, because we both cried during
Yes. This was
it.
such an emotional book. Katie, you are really just punching us in the heart.
Can you tell us a little bit about like what inspired this book and what went into making it?
Um, so I always tell people like really what started it. I wasn't set out to write this book at all because I was like, I need to work on my sequel for my Assassin trilogy. And then I'd seen somewhere on Instagram someone had an art piece. They're like, oh, it's two necromancers, like a married couple necromancer. And they're like, well, they're on the run. I was like, oh, that's cool. And I'd had in the back of my mind like a Hades and Persephone kind of gender bent story, but it was just like way off in the distance. And I was like, oh, well, what if like the woman was the necromancer and the husband was like a healer and something with plant magic and it was Scottish inspired world, and then I just started writing it. But I thought it was going to be a novella. Way definitely overshot that. So and then I just started to kind of unfold into like exploration of grief and just how is, a married couple, how are they still together on the run? How are they, just going through life and just really people trying to find their place in the world and a safe kind of world for themselves. But I wanted it to be a little bit cozy, but it wasn't like super cozy. Like definitely not Legends and Lattes cozy because I wanted a little bit more depth to that. So yeah, and then I started that it was like March of 2022, and then I released it in May of 2023. So it was definitely the shortest amount of time I've spent writing a novel. So it was real scary. And then it was like, oh, Spitball's coming around, so we'll just chuck that in there and see what happens. And then here we are.
Oh,
And it ended well.
yeah.
Yes. Almost
I've
it was off by 0.05
Oh
for
my
second
gosh.
place. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
hmm
Well, and this book is a gender bent Hades and Persephone tale. At its core,
Mhm.
you saying that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Because we
Yeah.
follow Morana, who is a bone weaver, I believe is
hmm
the
Mhm.
term you use. And that is outlawed in the land that she lives in. And she is married to Percy, who is able to, he's a root weaver and a flesh, I forget the term,
I think
but
he's a flesh mender and a root sower. Isn't that what it
yes.
flesh
is?
mender,
Okay.
root sower. Sorry about that.
No,
No,
you're
that's
Uh,
fine.
good.
and he is able to heal, and he is a very bright and happy person and very optimistic. And Morana has a different perspective on life because of how she grew up and how isolated she feels. And you just did such an effective job of kind of changing a lot of what I expected in a book like this.
Mhm.
Especially, I mean, from the photo of the main cover, you have representation of a wife who's taller than her husband and
Yeah.
bigger than her husband, which I loved. I was obsessed
Mhm.
with that.
I really wanted that. I was like, oh, that would be fun.
I, I think we need to have more representation of like short kings
Yes.
and their tall ladies, because I thought that was just it showed like, because I think it adds something to your book where
Mhm.
you meet them, and we hear a little bit about their backstory. By the time we meet them, they've been married for about 11 years and they do have this strong bond, but we also see flashbacks of them coming together. And like you kind of see, and I apologize if I'm misstating
Oh, no,
Morana's
you're good.
name. But you have like moments of her not expecting Percy to be attracted to her, or like her coming later into realizing that they have an attraction for each other. And I think that that happens a lot in like the realities of the world, where people have these like gender expectations where it's like, oh, you're
Mhm.
taller than him, so like you guys can't get together. And I just thought that was such an effective way of showing like love and a different type of love that people don't always expect.
Mhm.
What was it like to write their relationship in general, though? Because I took a lot away from this book because I just felt so represented by it. And I'm somebody who personally I deal with chronic illness and infertility myself, so this was actually a really meaningful read to me. But I really appreciated the depictions of Percy and the way that he cares for Morana and the anxiety and grief that she feels just in their relationship because he does have to take on the role of caregiver quite a bit and just being that emotional support. So what was it like to write that?
It was very it was very hard in the beginning because I'm not married. So I was like going to my married friends, just asking like, is this too wish fulfillment in in a guy? Because again, it is a woman's POV, but wanting to kind of have like the balance of what is it to be a healthy relationship. And I'm not, I told myself I would never write a romance novel. I was like, well, we'll just skip that. We'll get to the like the married part. But then my beta readers were like, well, let's show like how they got there. I'm like, okay, gosh. All right, so we're still gonna have to write a romance, I guess. But really just wanting one of the balance of understanding this person, but also being okay with when they're not okay. Like,
Hmm.
we don't have to make everything okay, which is Percy's like main fault because it was like he's too perfect. So you got to do the fault of he wants to fix everything. And then when it's not fixed, like that's really hard, both in just his magic and then who he is as a person. So, and then Morana on the other side leans more into the anxiety and depression side, and the melancholy for sure. So just like how do we have the happy sunshine and the less so kind of just where's that happy ground? So it was just really just playing around with it and just getting feedback from my readers and just like what's real life in these characters
Yeah.
and just being okay with some things aren't going to be resolved and they don't have to be. And just how are the outside things and the stressors of everyday life impacting what's going on the inside. So just trying to find that balance was difficult. So again, so thankful for my beta readers. But ultimately I just wanted it to be a foundation of, you know, still continuing to love each other even though you may not feel it and life certainly feels real hectic. And just being able to trust each other in that.
I found it like so realistic, honestly. Like, I not to like brag on my own husband, but he supports me a lot, and I think that I saw in Percy like and Morana a lot of like my own relationship because Morana has this almost like I don't want to say like constant negativity, but there's like a a fear of being too positive, whereas Percy
Yeah.
is so positive that he's like I just want to see the best in the situation. I just want like even when they're talking about like they there's going to be spoilers, fans of the pod. Like there's going to be spoilers. So this is a spoiler, but even when they're talking about like naming their child, they've dealt with infertility in the past and miscarriage and pregnancy loss. And so for Morana, that's something that's really difficult to try and wrap her head around, like the idea of doing something so permanent like naming their child. And for Percy, he's like joking around about it and trying to be positive in the situation. And I just found that to be like so heartwarming and so realistic to the way that couples can kind of balance each other out in these really difficult moments. I just really appreciated the way that they were depicted.
Thank you. Yeah, I really wanted to, because Morana's like whole thing is just like overcoming the past events. It's like one of it, part of it's like, it is founded in like everything that seems good, it does eventually go away. And she has that fear of just like what her power is and what that means for her life. So it's really, her living in fear and just trying to move through that. Whereas, Percy's the optimist. And so we all know those people. It's just like, it doesn't mean that you don't recognize the bad things and that things are hard. It's just being able to see through that and work through that in a different way. So I wanted to showcase both those sides of how
Mhm.
to kind of navigate through trauma and just the hard things in life. So that
Well,
was
and I
that was the part of the book that was fun in that exploration, but also difficult because it's like we
yeah.
got these two very different people.
Well, and I think it helps because you worked on the tension of the couple. Like I
Yeah.
highlighted something that actually like like Laura said, resonated with me and my pairing because I am kind of the dark cloud in my relationship. And this felt like a conversation I would have had with my partner. But you have a moment where like Percy and Morana just had a fight, and then he says, I don't like seeing you suffering. I know you get stuck in those heavy emotions and it's hard for you to get out of it. You feel deeply,
Mhm.
and I love that about you. I want to fix it, but a broken heart isn't something I can fix with flesh mending. I don't know what to do with things I can't heal. And I think that that's a beautiful tension that you created where they aren't a perfect couple, but they are perfect for each other because they
Mhm.
feel for each other.
Mhm. Absolutely. And there's so many moments too where I feel like Percy is very supportive and like validating of her. Where I have like a note too of this moment where like throughout the story, it's obviously from Morana's point of view, but we're getting a very like Percy is awesome POV, which he is, but at the same time, it's kind of one of those things where it's like he went to this fancy school and he learned how to do all these things and he's so great at this. And I think she then starts to kind of question herself.
Mhm.
And when she's questioning her own abilities and intelligence, he has this moment where he's like, you're very intelligent and knowledgeable too, and you are capable of so many things. And I was just like really struck by that because it's like she has this imposter syndrome and is a little unwilling to acknowledge that she's just like this really awesome and capable person herself because she
Mhm.
didn't go to school. And I thought that was so interesting that you were able to depict how you can be an intelligent person and a knowledgeable person without having like extreme higher education, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
was that something that you were like intentionally trying to show?
Not in that regard, but more of just like her seeing herself in a different light because again, with the magic, it's she's grown up knowing it's taboo and then she left home at an early age. She didn't really have like a lot of the validation from other people in her family. I mean, her mother loved her and supported her and her siblings loved her, but it's like she made that choice to leave, which,
Mhm.
you know, impacted her. And so living in isolation, not really having anyone who saw her in a positive light. I think she internalized that a lot. So having someone else kind of point those things out like we need in real life of, you know, I don't know if I'm good at this, but you know, you can be smart without having a degree.
I,
Um,
But she
I
also
think
has
that
this fear of herself too. Like I have this written down, but you just kind of mentioned it. Could you kind of like dig into that a little bit for us? Like this fear that Morana has of what she is?
yeah, so I think again it comes from like the cultural stigma of the world of just and then also our Western association with death, which was the other kind of exploration of how do we grieve, how do we view death as Westerners, whereas, you know, other cultures, it's like this is something that happens, and so it's not something that we like, but we have to move through it. So her just trying to wrestle with the fact of like this power is inside of you, it's a part of you, um, and overcoming like what people have said, what is the association of it, and actually seeing how it can be helpful. And it's like she can't bring people back to life, but at the core of it is just like preserving the stories of those who have gone on in a healing way. And
Mm.
the Bone Weaver's ability, it's like at its core, it's the same. You can hear the voices of the dead. You can, you know, kind of reanimate them for a period of time. But I think each one interacts very differently with the
Mhm.
dead and how they can help with like passing. You know, people are passing on, and then those who are left behind and being able to sense death as something that is also a part of healing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
she has not felt that or really understood that until like really meeting Percy and still kind of seeing like when they work together as a healer, like she's not necessarily medically trained, but being able to know like, hey, someone's suffering. Here's maybe where death is. Like, maybe let's see what we can do about that. Um, that takes a little bit longer for her to understand. Um, yeah, I wanted to kind of have that as you need someone else to kind of help you understand that. Not that it's going to fix, you know, and make everything super better. Um, but you know, just coming to terms with yourself and accepting who you are, even when everyone else is like, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing or
Mhm.
a bad thing. Um, So that's really what I wanted for her, is to wrestle with this power. And then also just like necromancy always gets like a bad stigma. So I was like, how can we make this a little bit different in terms of it's not such a dark and heavy thing, but it
Yeah,
also
and
can
when
bring
you
like
talk about
some.
like the honoring of
Mhm.
memories, I think that that's the perfect way to frame it.
So yeah,
Well,
wanting her to see that a little bit, like I think she kind of gets it, like when she like wants to leave stories for people from the dead, but it's like again that fear of like if someone realizes and starts asking questions, I don't know what's gonna happen.
well,
Hmm.
and that shows like it's a failure of society, and I think you
Yeah.
discussing the Western view of grief is so perfect, especially for this novel, because she has to be in hiding about her power. She cannot
Hmm.
be open about the fact that she is a bone weaver. And she talks about the loss that other people suffer because of her gifts. Because in the
Yeah.
first chapters, they lose someone, and there's a funeral where she's looking at the person's spouse, and she's like, I want to tell you all the things he thinks about and all the
Hmm.
things you might not have known about him, but I can't because you would not accept me. And I think
Hmm.
that that's such a look at like how people, and you talk about it in this book about like prejudices and how prejudice like fails all people. And I was wondering
Yeah.
if you like could dive in a little bit more on that and like your thoughts and how that like came to be in this book.
Um, Again, it's kind of like just growing up around a lot of fantasy and just like seeing like, where are the prejudice? What is like at its core, it's like it causes most of the problems. Like just because I don't like that, it ostracizes, it hurts, it doesn't allow for the dialogue of, well, I may not agree with that, or maybe I don't like that, but how can we find the common ground in this? Where is the good in this? So fantasy, it's always we've grown up around it. So, and then specifically in this book, just, how this power that's misunderstood. So really it's about like what's misunderstood and how can we change a little bit of perspective. And it's not going to happen overnight for sure, but I think it also comes from within of, learning to accept like those differences, those things that people don't understand. Um, and how can, learn to just be okay with who you are and that not everyone's going
Hmm.
to understand that, and still finding joy in life for sure.
I
It's
think
really
too the book does a really good job of like bringing humor into a lot of darkness because there's so much like terrible stuff that's happening to them and they're trying to work through a lot of hard things that they've been through and even like the flashbacks to the past like those are some positive lights but Percy especially and also Morhenna that chicken brings some levity to the story but I think that it's interesting how you've written the story in a way that there's these dark things happening, but there's still humor. There's still plant puns. There's
Hmm.
still a chicken that miraculously appears all the time.
Yep.
who is so fast. Every time they're walking, I'm like, this chicken could really keep up.
She is booking it.
I did look up how fast the chicken could like go, and I was like, I don't know if this is like totally accurate, but I'm like, the chicken's just got to keep up. We're
It's a
gonna
fantasy world where
It's
the
keep
dead
amazing.
can
raising
be
chicken.
raised by their bones. I think you
I,
can just have a chicken that can walk at 15 miles an hour. It's fine.
it does make me
Yep.
laugh though that fantasy authors be like, you know what? I'm writing a book about necromancy and I need to look up how fast a chicken goes.
I did. I thought about that. I was like, how far can a chicken walk? I'm like, can they handle the cold? I'm like, I know they're gonna carry the chicken at some point. But
Have
I'm
you
just like,
have you seen the lady on TikTok who has like the useless farm where there's an emu
so
who
that was
keeps
the
attacking
direct
her?
inspiration
Okay, I
for
was
more henna.
wondering.
That was the
Okay,
direct, and I was like,
Laura, do you know about this on
Is
TikTok?
this Emmanuel?
No, there's
The
Karen
a
the
email?
emu.
yeah, there's an emu on TikTok who like tries to kill her female owner all the time,
Yeah,
and
it's
everyone is
where
like, "What's going on?" And it's
its
because
name
the
is
emu.
Emmanuel, right?
Oh, I don't know if it's
Her name's
Emmanuel.
Karen. I'm
Her
Oh,
pretty
name is
sure.
Karen.
Karen.
Oh, I thought it was Emmanuel.
No, but there's an emu named Karen who like tries to kill this woman all the time, and it's because she imprinted on the husband, and she's obsessed
Oh,
with the husband. So she's like, "I hate you. You're stealing my partner." And so when I was reading that, I was like, "Is this inspired by that emu?"
It is. It is. And I was like, well, we're gonna do a chicken because they're also can be equally terrifying.
Yeah.
birds
So,
in general, I think, just kind of scare people. They're a
Yeah.
hmm
little bit too close to dinosaurs still.
absolutely. Yes. But
I
yeah,
do.
definitely.
I also think it says a lot with the prejudice and all those things with Percy's optimism, because a lot of Percy, I kept thinking about the fact that he has the privilege of being optimistic because
Yeah.
he was raised in like a society where he is put on a pedestal and he is
Hmm.
seen
Hmm.
as this healer. And then you have Morana who's like, I can't do the things I want. And like, I
Hmm.
feel these things that no one else can feel and they wouldn't understand. And I think that that's like really interesting that you kind of
Yeah.
molded those two characters in a relationship with each other where she like loves those things about Percy and supports those things about Percy, but it doesn't mean that she doesn't feel pain because of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Because
What was it
again,
like
it's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what was it like to kind of depict the past and like how they were still reminiscing on the past? Morana is fondly like thinking of the past, but they're still kind of like running from their past and afraid of their past.
Hmm. So most of those were in an attempt because again, a lot of my beta readers were like, well, I want to know like how we got here in this. And
Hmm.
so since it's kind of a multi-layered story, especially at the end where it's like, oh, here's the daughter now reading the story of her mother. So in a sense, it's kind of like she's almost seeing those flashbacks, so it's multi-layered. Um, but just going back to the core of like their relationship in hard times of like what are those moments that really solidify the love, solidify the moments of growth. So I wanted to just highlight some of those moments for her, especially since memories and past are so deeply entwined with her gift. Um, and just looking to see how is that going to go back to a moment of like resilience or change, and how can we use that in the present when things are hard and difficult. So that was more of like the moments of that, and then also just to throw in a little bit of cozy into the dark, because yeah, I didn't want it to be super dark
But
and
I
have
It
think
no
was
hope.
probably like a big shift to go from writing like The Assassin of Grins and Secrets to this, but at the same time, it's still handling so many heavy things.
Yeah, that was where I was like, it's cozy dark, it's cozy-ish. It's
Mm,
not Legends and Lattes cozy, but it's not like grim dark,
for
and there's no
sure.
happiness here. Um, so just because there wasn't anything quite like that, I was like,
Hmm.
we're just gonna try this, and eventually someday write a true cozy where no one is truly suffering. Um, we'll see.
Well, I will say that one thing I did notice about both books is your obsession with food just showing up on the
Yes,
Yes.
page.
yes.
What was it like kind of creating more of the baked goods of and like the coziness vibe using your characters in this book?
Yeah. So again, I had wanted a Scottish inspired book, so I was like, okay, this is the perfect time. I know those foods. I could definitely dive into that. Because yeah, it's a lot of cold and dreariness, and so I'm like, comfort foods in some form or fashion. And I'll just always add food regardless of what book it is. Because it's important that my characters eat. So
Can you tell us more
yeah.
about like the Scottish folklore involvement in the book? Because I
Yeah.
picked up on a few things that just like me knowing some random pieces from media, like, oh, Will o' the Wisp, like I
Mhm.
know that is, and Kelpie, I know what that is, and I was like, this is a very Scottish book, but there were certain things that I was like, oh, I hadn't heard of that before. Like, is it Brolux? Like, how do you say or
I think
Brolac?
that's how it's
I
pronounced.
don't,
I'm very bad with pronunciations, and I've
yeah,
looked up all of them. Let
awful.
me look at my cheat sheet real quick. Yeah, so I did just kind of a deep dive because I wanted like the mythology to also kind of be reflected in the natural world, so it's not too supernatural because I mean the gods do exist and they have like
Mhm.
different things, but I wanted them to also still kind of be a part of the normal world. So like the she and everything, like those, I was like, that sounds fun as some sort of dragonfly fairy lizard thing. Um, and then yeah, the Brawlican. Um, some things I wanted to embody more of the darker kind of natural world that are kind of towing the line between the dead and undead things.
Mhm.
But yeah, just wanted to kind of incorporate them into the natural world, but then also some things that are tied specifically to the different magics. Like oh my gosh, hold on, where did it go? The the, oh my gosh, the wailing woman, the banshee, or
Hmm.
that's typically what it is.
Yeah.
So it's like that is more of something that's only seen by the bone weavers because of just their affinity to the god of or the goddess of death. Um, so yeah, just some I was just like, we're just gonna do a deep dive. That sounds fun. Let's put that in, and then other things just kind of made up. But yeah, just wanted to incorporate all those elements since Celtic mythology is so rich and still so
Hmm.
tied to the land, even in modern day. So I thought that'd be fun fantasy world
Yeah.
creatures to
What
add
made
in.
you what made you want to like look more at the Celtic side of things for this book?
Um, Again, just because the title came to me first for this book, I was like, okay, so we're not going to do Greek. We're not going to do that. So it's like Scottish sounds really fun to do. And just the the vibes of Scotland are very dreary at times. And especially as you go into the deeper wilderness of the Highlands, it's like I can see why people think there's maybe a ghost dog that's out here to get you
Sure.
because it's empty and then there's a lot of mist and trees. It's like there's a lot we can do here that plays on the brain. Um, but yeah, I just because I had spent so much time in Scotland, I was like, this seems like a natural kind of thing to dive into. And the Celtic society is still like it's just ingrained in all of the UK and Scotland. So there's a lot of rich history there.
That's really cool.
Something that Laura pointed out was the chronic illness representation that you put in this. Morana suffers with arthritis, and she has suffered from a young age. What made you kind of interested in looking at that piece of it, where like she not only has this sense of like a different type of magic system, but also her body kind of fails her in certain ways that she is struggling to handle and cope with.
Yeah. So it was kind of another thing that I hadn't seen in fantasy a whole lot is like people dealing with chronic illness, and then also especially when there is magic available, usually it
Mhm.
can be like, oh, we fixed this with magic, where it's like I wanted to kind of show the limitations of magic still.
Which I
Um,
loved.
so it's like
Yeah.
it can do so much, but it just can't fix everything.
Hmm.
But so my mom has arthritis, so just for years, like she has dealt with that. But then also a distant cousin of mine, she actually had rheumatoid arthritis as a child. So just like, what does that do to you as a child? Like
Yeah.
having this thing where you do have chronic pain, it also causes you to get sick a lot. It's not like normal arthritis. So just, well, especially in a damp, cold
Yeah.
climate, it's like that really can aggravate it. So I just wanted that to be part of her. Um, just to see how you live out in a fantasy world with that, but still can be a whole person and navigate through life and have joys and everything. And this was before I was diagnosed like with endometriosis last year. So I was just like, oh, cool, interesting. Which is not always debilitating, but it is something like, oh, cool, I get to live with this
Hmm.
until maybe menopause. Um, so just having a lot of friends who deal with chronic illness and don't necessarily have that kind of representation. Again, this isn't like this is the pedestal of representation, but just like how you navigate life, the good days and the bad days,
Yeah.
and still being aware of that.
I
But
think it
I
was nice too that you also depicted how not only are there like ups and downs and like the level of pain that Morana is dealing with, but also that being in stress can kind of set off a flare of pain or just set you into a flare. I know like for myself personally,
mhm,
like I will flare if I'm under mass amounts of stress or whatever. And if I'm able to take some time and rest and be in my safe space or whatever, it makes me feel better. And I thought that was so good to see that Morana also had that her safe space was Percy and that he was able to comfort her and make her feel better at times and not just through like remedies that he would try to create, but that he was able to also just help relieve some of that stress for her.
mhm,
Yeah, and it's really beautiful that you made a system where like you said, you can't just cure it, because I think in
Yes.
fantasy it's so easy to be like, oh, this person is born with this, and then we
Hmm.
fixed it. And I think like
Hmm.
fantasy is an escape, but it's also a representation of the world that
Yeah.
we live in. And so showing like, hey, we might be able to relieve some of the pain, but like we can do that with modern medicine, and there are
Hmm.
still failures to it, and it does not fix everything.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little more about like the blood gifts and how
Hmm.
many there are and what they
Yes.
all do?
Also my cheat sheet because I
Okay.
kind of forgotten. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So there's 11 different blood gifts, and they're based on the 11 different gods that exist in this world. So in the beginning, like they all kind of were living in harmony. There's beast charmers, bone weavers, earth carvers, flame kindlers, flesh menders, light casters, lightning strikers, root sower, shadow catcher, wind dancer, and sorry, water dancer and wind singer. So I really wanted to again to bring in like the natural world um, of magics, and they do come from the blood of the gods, which were just gifted in the beginning to kind of help bring about just order and unity in the world. Um, and so when the Morgans came and then the war was happening, some of the gods were killed, and so the goddess of death, Aranod, she again was teaching the bone weavers to kind of help restore like the fallen gods, but then that magic was kind of lost, especially since some of them sided with the Morgans and then raised some of the the eviler things in the world. So that is where the stigma of like the bone weavers are evil kind of
Mhm.
came from. It's like, oh, good, you can restore the bodies of the dead. That's not scary or, anything. So instead of like what it was originally intended to be was, to help balance out life and then also to restore what was lost. So yeah, I just had a lot of fun with it, and the veins turn different colors depending on like the
Mhm.
gift, and they can kind of show up in different ways. So specifically with the bone weavers, I liked like, okay, your bones are visible when you use your magic.
Which is
That's
cool.
fun. And so double gifted means you just have the ability to use two different ones. But again, I also wanted the magic to have like a cost because you are using the power in your blood. So if you use too much, you basically suffer from anemia and can
Mhm.
die. So yeah.
I like
But
that
I
yeah, it
thought
was
it was
just
really
fun.
great.
this was also a very unique book because it does deal, like, it is a fantasy novel that deals with things that often aren't talked about in fantasy, or they're like
Mhm.
side stories. So you have a married couple instead of like people finding love for the first time, which
Mhm.
is typically what you see in fantasy. And then you have a
Which I
Hmm.
really
protagonist.
appreciate because I hate that whole will they, won't they.
And then you have like a protagonist who is pregnant and who has suffered from loss, and who her magic, like there are certain moments where they do certain things and they all have to like discuss like how will this affect the baby, because she does want this baby and she wants the baby to be safe. And I wondered like if you could talk to us a little bit more about kind of what went into building that type of story and what made you interested in showing like these types of things we typically don't see in fantasy.
Yeah. So again, it was I didn't want to write a a romantic book, a romantasy. Because as they say, it's like if they're married, it's not a romantasy. Because I guess you can only find love when you're two single people.
There is nothing
Yeah.
romantic
There's
about
nothing
There's no
romantic about
romance.
marriage.
marriage at
There's
all.
no romance in marriage, is what I gathered. So it's like we're gonna skip that and just have like a good solid couple getting together. Because again, I'm very I'm very tip I have a preference for romance, and if it's done right, I will like it. But if it's insta love or anything like that, I'm like, I can't do this. Um, so yeah, it just wasn't something I saw a whole lot in fantasies, like good, healthy married couples that are going on an adventure together, whether they want to or not. And then I did want to like I knew it right off that I wanted to explore like loss and grief, but I wasn't sure like quite what was going to happen. And then just another thing I hadn't seen a whole lot of done well in fantasy was just main characters that have experienced like miscarriage or loss or infertility. Because typically it's like, oh no, they miscarried and they're sad forever. It's like you do carry that loss with you in different
Mhm.
ways, but it doesn't have to be the whole identity of the person. So,
Mhm.
and especially for a bone weaver, it's like you can sense death. So it's like there's that other level of like that's really traumatic to kind of know that death has happened. And how do you move on from that while still wanting to have a life and produce life, hopefully down the road. So again, just heightening Morana as a character with insecurities of things that are both perceived but also based in reality. Um, so I wanted just to have that going through is like you're on the run for your life, but life still persists. And so there's a baby coming. What do you do? And just added that other layer of like this is something like that's both an anxiety focus for her, but then also hope for both of them. So what is this going to look like? So really just wanted to explore that.
I'm
I
going
felt
to
like
pull a
the
quote from you that says, "Grief doesn't shrink, but we grow around it." And I think that
yeah.
Hmm.
that is a beautiful look at this story and like her
Hmm.
loss and how she deals with her grief. So,
I think that moment between Morana and her mother where they are both sharing that was a moment that made me cry.
Oh, I cried
But
writing that. So I was
oh,
like, ah,
good.
dang.
but like I'm obviously I mentioned earlier, I'm someone who deals with infertility, and it's like you said, it's not talked about at almost at all within media, like any kind of fictional media. So to have the depiction of two women who are sharing a conversation about what has happened to them and how they're grieving and processing these things and how things in their life have affected them because of this, it was really, really meaningful. And I like so appreciative that you included that because I think just having characters be willing to have the conversation kind of opens it up for others to have the conversation.
Mhm.
And I just thought that was great. And it was so realistic too, the way that they both felt about these things. I just saw a lot of like some of my own feelings in them. And so I just thought that was really great. So I'm really glad that you decided to add some of these things to the book.
Mm.
I mean, if we're going to talk about things that made us cry, I
Yeah.
also have a dead parent. And so I felt personally victimized anytime you brought up a dead parent. And I thought it was beautiful because like when Murata returns home, she feels like she's been keeping this huge secret. And she
Hmm.
has these moments with her mother where she opens up and her mom is able to see different parts of her that she didn't know were she knew something was there or she did know something was there, but she wanted her daughter to come to her on her own terms, which I think is very unique to a story. And the part, one of the parts that made me cry was the mom sharing the story of how she knew that Morana was a bone
Yeah.
weaver all along.
Hmm.
And I thought it was such a beautiful look into the actual world building that you did
Yeah.
because she talks about how this is a memory and like memories are hugely important here. And Morana doesn't remember this moment of
Hmm.
her bringing her father back and reanimating him and her just talking to her dad because that is what is normal to her. And the mom coming in and seeing it and accepting her daughter in that moment and going, he's ready to rest now. And I started sobbing because I
Hmm.
just think that's such a beautiful and touching moment of like, actual grief, especially like if you've lost a parent. I know that like my sisters and I have talked about how like we would like die of happiness if we were able to have one more conversation with our mom. And I thought that like you showing that in this book is a beautiful way of showing like the lighter side of necromancy. Like you said, like necromancy gets a bad rap, and I thought you did like such a beautiful job of like showing a different side of what that power could be. And I really appreciated just having a conversation with her mom where she had this huge fear that a conversation was going to go poorly, and then her mom was like, I knew all along, but also respected you enough to let you figure it out on your own.
Mhm.
Well, Katie, at the end of the book, you, I think, called it a beauty, finding beauty in death
Mhm.
in the epilogue. And can you kind of like tell us more about that, like how it is to write beauty into death?
Mm. Yeah, so again, it kind of goes to looking at death from a non-Western perspective, because again, it's well, at least older. Like I hate to say, I love graveyard, like old graveyards, just because they're so cool in the fact of just like how the monuments are, the family plots and everything, and just the time that was taken for that. It's like we know it's inevitable, it happens, it sucks, but different cultures view it in a different way. Like they'll have like the communal grieving of, we miss this person, but here are the good things that have been left behind. Here is what happens out of death. And I think at that time I was writing it, my aunt had passed away. So I had learned like a lot of stuff from her life that I didn't know while she was alive, which was both sad, but also it's like, okay, I can see now like the different touch points um, of impact of her life in other things through these stories. So there is beauty in that of like, it's sad she's gone, sad I didn't know this like while she was living, but to now know these things and the legacy like she's left behind. So really wanted to kind of focus how death does that. And then there's a verse in scripture that says like a seed is useless until it falls to the ground and dies. So it's like things have to sometimes die in order for there to be life. So
Mhm.
really, just looking at the natural world of decay and then life coming back from it, um, even though it is again something we don't always like to talk about and focus
Mhm.
on, but it's like it is part of that cycle. It is part of
Yeah.
what we all will face, and so what gets left behind is what truly is either beautiful or not. So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the resilience of people is what kind of brings the beauty into the situation, like you're
mhm,
mentioning. I think that was depicted really well in the book, that the characters work through such difficult and traumatic things, but they remain resilient and are able to continue moving forward through this and find beauty in themselves and in their situations.
mhm,
Well, and a huge part of this is Marana finding community. Like she finds
Hmm.
community in her home life, she finds community in other people who also have her talents and see it in a different way than she was raised viewing it. But you also do a really good job of juxtaposing that with the big bad of the novel, the antagonist who didn't find that community or warped the
Yeah.
community that he did find to fit the standards that he saw in the world. And I thought that was like such an effective way of like bringing this tale of resilience full circle of saying like, well, it doesn't mean that everyone finds the right community, but like Morana is able to, through Percy and through her family, find the community that is best for her.
mhm.
Can we talk about a couple of those bone weavers though? Because the bakery story, that was terrifying.
Yeah,
Like
that was terrifying. I was so
Mhm.
scared for
I was like,
them.
what the heck is that? I'm like, this is Sweeney Todd. She's going to
Yeah,
make them
Yeah,
she's
into
feeding
pies.
them meat pies.
that's why I
Like,
put that trigger warning of like it's light cannibalism,
I
but
was like,
to
what
explain it.
the world?
Yeah, no, because again, I'd heard the Sweeney Todd story. It's like, oh, that'd be really messed up. But
especially if you were a
also,
bone weaver, like you're like, I can hear you, and I'm still choosing
I
to
know.
feed you. Like,
oh my gosh, yes. But yeah, I liked Anstis as a character just because it's like, yeah, Morana needs a friend who understands her, but then also showcasing like the different cost of the bone weaver magic. I'm like, yeah, for me, like recipes that are passed down from people who are no longer with us. I was like, oh, that'd be fun to kind of include for the price that a certain bone weaver has to use. Um, Not using humans, but like what is this person's favorite recipe and to like replicate that and carry that on. So that was fun in that regards for her.
What about like crafting the villain in this? I'm not sure how to say his name, the captain of uh
That's a good question. I've totally
I'm
forgotten his name.
terrible with
Hold
names, so
on.
I'm just like, you know what? I'll
it
make Katie
started with an
say
M.
it.
Yes. I
I'm
think it's
also terrible with
McAddo.
name.
I think it's
Uh,
McAdda.
uh,
Magada.
Well, his
Okay.
uh,
his name is Alistair, so we'll just
oh,
Okay,
call
well,
him,
Alistair's much easier.
Alistair. Yeah.
yeah, Alistair. Yeah, so I just wanted someone slightly unhinged. Um,
Check.
Yep.
yeah, so
We
again,
did it.
just someone who has been told again, like all his life, like this ability you have is not good unless it's used for, like offensive purposes. So again, to kind of have that part of yourself that diminishes because you don't use it because you've been told like, it's not good. It's not what society views as right. So he
Mhm.
chooses again to kind of vilify himself and then anyone else who has this ability because that's what his culture and society has told him. Um, and it just turns him into a really bitter person. So again, what
Hmm.
bitterness can do to people. But yeah, I just wanted some sort of real imminent threat, not just more on his own anxieties and worries.
Yeah.
But now we have it personified as an actual person who is there and he's just keeps following them.
Yeah, he's like relentless too, where it's just like, come on, my guy, there's got to be somebody else out there. Like,
Nope.
oh, so scary. I'm always amazed by some of these like villains where I'm like, this seems a little too much, but
But you also did such a
it's just
good
like,
job of like making it make sense at the end,
but
where
it
it's
does
like,
make sense
oh,
when it's like, oh yeah, because throughout the book you're like, come on, let it go, my guy. And then when you get to the end and you find out, it's like, oh no, he hates himself. That's what
yeah.
it is. Like he's
Mhm.
terrified of what he is, so he targets what he fears. And it's like,
The villain was
oh,
inside us all along.
Yes.
you know who I hate the most? Myself.
Myself.
hmm
uh, well, and it makes more sense with like we do find out through it that like Morana is much more powerful, so he probably sensed
Hmm.
that, and then it's like, well, I
hmm
have to snuff this out because I
Yeah.
see too much of myself in it, and it's a good way to show that like especially again I keep quoting you back to you and I'm so sorry because I can
No, it's
only
good because
imagine.
it's been a while. I'm like, what did I
Okay.
write? Did I write this?
But you said like you can't find prejudice with weapons. It's only defeated by the
Hmm.
truth, but only by those who listen to it. And truth can't be shouted at a mob that's been defeated by their own noise. And I think that that is
Yeah.
such a beautiful discussion. And it
Hmm.
is like, it comes full circle with Alistair, where it's like, oh no,
Yeah.
he can't hear in the noise of this mob that hates people for existing.
Hmm.
And that is like the failure of society, and that is why he was so obsessed with like taking it down and killing that part of himself.
hmm
So well done.
Yeah. There's really just a lot of things that you brought into this that I'm just impressed that you were able to like tie them together in the way that you did. Was that something that was tricky for you?
It was in the sense that the first couple times writing it, it wasn't intentional until someone pointed it out. I was like, oh yeah, we should probably do that. Because again, I was like, it's gonna be a novella, and then it just kept growing. And I was like, oh, okay,
This is a really long novella.
this is a really long. It's two novellas put into one. So I'm like, oh, we gotta kind of cut down on that. But then I was like, okay, we have room to explore a little bit more here. But again, I didn't want it to be like 700 pages.
Sure.
So like some of the things, again, the beauty of writing in first person is you only know as much as your main character does. So it's like
Hmm.
if there's questions you have and the main character doesn't know it, oops. Just like normal life. I only know what I
Like
know.
someone asks you like did this happen in your book, and you're like she didn't know that, so
Well,
sure.
sometimes I get feedback.
Like,
They're like, I want more of the government. I want more of the outside. I'm like, literally, she's just on survival mode. She's not
Right.
really caring about the complexities of her government and what else is happening. So I'm like, sorry.
sounds like none of her business, so
None of her business. He doesn't know much about her power because, again, no one was there to teach her. So, oops.
oh,
I
so
think another thing that was interesting too was the way that plants were weaved in throughout the
mhm,
story because and it's also cool too because you have mentions of that Marana says that she's trying to learn about plants from Percy, and Percy has this power with plants, obviously, but the chapter titles all are flowers and
mhm,
they like have the scientific name and then they have like I guess the abilities that these can bring to people like tranquility or
Mm.
peace or it says like grief or
mhm.
whatever after each uh scientific name. What was the inspiration for that and like how did that kind of work into each chapter?
So again, I'm not saying Percy's my favorite, but I
But
did
you're
take
saying
my
it.
own quiz and I was a root sower. So, I
I
like
see a lot of
plants.
plants in the background there.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are not all of them. There's more. They're all off to the side. But yeah, so it's like I really wanted that plant magic again, like that juxtaposition of life and death. And so there is I don't think it was started with the Victorians, but they certainly took it into full swing because again, you couldn't just confess your feelings to people with words. So they used flowers. So the flower language was very symbolic in that time period. So just looking at both flowers that are kind of native-ish to Scotland. I wanted to kind of keep it that way. And then what are the meanings of them? So it really was intentional with that in the chapter headings of here's thematically maybe what will happen in this chapter. Um, so that was a lot of fun. I have several flower language books that are just they're fun to deep dive into. Um,
Yeah, the entomology of it all was really interesting, but it also like like you're saying, like those chapter headings, they made me a little nervous at
Yeah.
times. I was like, what?
I was like, what
Yeah.
do you mean that there is going to be like heartbreak? What's
What do
going
you mean
on?
grief?
Yeah.
What do you
That
mean?
was that was also I was like, we'll see. We'll just throw that out there. Give the people maybe some warning.
Oh, it was very it kept you on the edge of your seat every time
Hmm.
when and I really loved the flower design. Like you had like the different
Yeah.
flowers. Did you have like an artist you worked with, or were you able to just pull those yourself or
I got them all off of Canva.
oh
So
nice.
Oh,
yes, Canva
Smart.
did a lot of searching. I was like, do you have this specific flower?
I
This
who
like
is
did
what
your
I need.
cover art?
Oh, it was the same artist who did the Assassin's cover, Jane
Okay,
May. She did that.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. My favorite color is purple, so I was like really drawn to it,
I
even
was like,
just
oh, we got two
the
purple
purple.
books, which was not the intention, but I was like, it's called Hills of Feather and Bone, and I was like, the magic's purple, so we gotta
Yeah.
incorporate that in. Which again, I love the cover, and some people were like, it looks like just it's so romantic-y. There's no fantasy. I'm like, there's a skull on the back if you look. So I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
I think people jumping into this book thinking it was just simply a romantasy would be a little shocked.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's a little sorely disappointed actually.
Yeah. Every
And
time I
it's
talk
a
about the
little
book,
deep.
I'm like, it's cozy dark. It's cozy dark. What does that mean?
Yeah,
Well, it's a little bit of happy and
a
there's
lot of it is
dark.
sad.
A lot of it's
Yeah.
sad.
What was one of the things that kind of surprised you most about writing this book?
Um, I think, that's a good question. Um, I think the reception for it, because again, this was more of like a book,
Hmm.
like this is just what I want to write based on kind of where I'm at in life. Um, and then just to see like how it impacted people emotionally in different ways. Because again, yes, it is about grief, which is the main thing. If we all grieve, we all go through those things, even though the reasons for it are different. But to get certain feedback from some people, especially like some of the Spiffbo judges, I was like, "Oh, this made you cry. I'm so sorry." Um, and just understanding like it is a heavy book at times. So like
Mhm.
if people couldn't make it through that for obvious reasons, like that's totally fine because
Yeah.
yeah, it gets heavy. But I think was the bigger surprise is just some of the reactions. Because I knew like, oh, a lot of women are gonna read this book, like, but the amount of guys who have read it and loved it and like connected with it, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
You
that's
have a lot of
interesting.
action like packed into this with
Hmm.
like the suite, and it is like a character-based novel, but I think there's so much like fast-pacedness of like they're on the run, they like have moments of like pause, but then they get swept back into it, and it is a beautiful look at like adult romance, and I think that there needs to be more of that in this and like
I also think it's important too, just for men to read these kind of stories because I think
Hmm.
there is a disconnect between, even in partnerships, that men don't fully understand the weight and the trauma related to infertility and pregnancy loss. And
Hmm.
so I I don't know that I would be someone to be like, this is a book for only women. I think it's important for men to read a book like this, especially I'm going to call you out, fantasy dude bros. You're all about Brandon Sanderson. You need to read a book
Hmm.
like this. Like
yeah.
you should. And
I
I
agree.
think that the representation here is just really great and that it's it's doing a lot of things and resonating with people because it's a book that is able to touch on these topics that have for such a long time not been addressed. And I think that's why you probably were getting this type of reception because I know just like me personally reading it, I'm like, I've never read a book that has people talking about miscarriage. I've never read a book that has someone who's dealing with the anxiety of being so in touch with their own body and being like chronically ill and just kind of overanalyzing every little move that they make and thinking, is this going to hurt my child? Is this going to hurt me? Is this going to make this kind of situation happen? And so I thought that was just so great. But I would challenge listeners, if you are somebody who has not read a book that handles themes like this, please check it out because I think it's an important read for a lot of people. Katie, we're just gonna keep
Yeah, we're just gonna keep
going
praising you
off
and making
about
That's
you
how
fine.
like
awesome
Keep
make
this
you
is.
uncomfortable. Do you want
No,
me to
that's
keep reading
fine.
quotes
No,
to you?
keep
Like
keep doing
this is
things.
also something you said that made me cry. I did have a question. Like it seems from the epilogue that this is a kind of a standalone novel
Mhm.
almost. And I'm sure that that was the intent. Do you have any like inkling that you might go back to that world or like have another adventure for them?
The great irony is I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a standalone. It'll be fine. No one else will ask me for anything else. And then immediately after, everyone's like, "Are you gonna explore more of the world? Is this a book one? Can you write more of this world?" I was like, "Dang, more work." But yes, so I've toyed around with the idea of maybe doing like a prequel novel that is more of a romance because it would focus on Morana and
Mm.
Percy. I did write a short story for a gift exchange that does
Ooh.
take place in the world a little bit before Morana's time. So probably some short stories in the world. But this would be like the main one, and everything
Yeah.
else would just be an add-on.
Yeah. No, I love and I loved the ending. The ending made me
Yeah.
cry where her
I guess I
there
didn't even realize that that was like the situation when I got to the epilogue, where I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a story being told
And I
of
didn't think of that until
everything.
the end. I was just like, oh yeah, she's gonna have a child, and if it's a bone weaver, they're gonna have stories. So I was like, oh cool, we'll do that.
That caught me off guard, and I thought it was really clever because I was like, oh, this is almost like a Princess Bride situation. And I was like, I kind of love that it wasn't just like her, you're just in her mind all this time, that it's like, no, we're getting the story being passed on.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, way to tie it all together.
Way to destroy me when she said, "I know my parents are proud of me. I
Mm.
heard it in their bones." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it was so sad."
Yeah, this is a very quotable book.
Yeah.
That was the
Uh,
intention, but mostly with the plant puns. I was like, we're gonna just have fun with that. So,
I
What was your
loved all
favorite
the
plant
plant
pun?
puns. Yeah.
ooh, oh my gosh. The I'm a fun guy one, because I did make a sticker out of that.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Good.
it's there. We gotta do it. Which technically, I know mushrooms aren't plants.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's part of the magic. We'll just leave that alone. It's fine.
In that world, it is a plant. Like,
It
come on,
is.
chickens can run
Percy
at
is just so
15 miles an hour.
powerful that he can interact with non-plants that are technically
Exactly.
some sort of plant. I don't know.
Exactly. No, I was very impressed with this entire book and
Yeah.
just the way you were able to weave in folklore and things we know and just rearrange them to build such a unique story. So very much
It was
well
it was
done.
a really great read, and honestly, I was nervous going into it because we had lined up this interview and everything, and I wanted to talk about it because like so many people have been talking about this book, and I really think that our listeners would enjoy hearing from you again, Katie. And then I kind of figured out a little bit of what the book was about, and I was like, I can't handle that. So I wasn't too sure how it was going to turn out for me, but I was really pleasantly surprised because it felt so realistic and was just very, very well done in terms of how the characters supported each other and reacted to the situations in their lives.
Yeah.
So, well, this episode is coming out December 18th. So, do you have any
Mhm.
new works that you would like to push and let everyone know that they could go find you if they've read Hills of Heather and Bone and they love it, or if they haven't read it yet, go get this book as well, but another
Yes.
book or anything else
Mhm.
that's coming along the horizon?
Yes. So again, a new territory to explore. November 22nd, Wild Skies, a Yeehaw Dragons story. It's a
So
novella.
cute.
This is a true novella. It is a fantasy western that asks the question, if cowboys rode dragons, what would the world look like? So it's definitely a western inspired story. Um, Follows this bounty hunter named Dale and his dragon named Bean as they search for this notorious outlaw and uncover a whole lot of stuff. There's magic, there's prehistoric North America fauna in this world, and it's a lot lighthearted, fun
So
compared to my other books.
after you all cry over Hills of Heather and
Go pick
Bone
up Wild Skies so you
and
can have a
have a
good
good
time.
laugh.
Just enjoy the vibes of a guy and his dragon.
The concept and the cover are really cute. So
Thank you. This was a different
I'm
artist I
excited.
used this time, so I was very happy with the design.
Oh,
Yeah,
So
it's
good.
really cute.
I needed
Well,
something that wasn't super dark, but doing a good job of it.
well,
Because I'm working on
everyone,
book two. for
Oh,
Grinning Assassins, so that should
Ooh.
hopefully come out next year.
oh man. Well, everyone, can you tell everyone where they can also find you?
Yes, I can be found on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, now Blue Skies. Been added to that under KE Andrews or KE Andrews 95 for Twitter and Blue Skies. Um, and most of my books can be purchased wherever books are sold, mostly online.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
And you have a
Well,
website too, correct?
I do. Yes, keandrews.org.
Okay,
well,
cool.
everyone, go pick up all of K.E. Andrews' works.
Yes.
We've definitely covered two of her books, so we
Hmm.
will be reading Wild Skies. You know, we're big
Yes.
fans. So make sure you're following her, make sure you're purchasing her books, and thank you so much for coming on again.
Yeah,
We
Katie,
had
we
a
really
delight
appreciate
talking
it.
to you.
Yeah,
Katie,
thank
what
you
have
so
you
much for
been
having me.
reading, watching, or
Oh,
enjoying
thank
before
you.
we leave?
Ooh, okay. So right before I came on, I'm into Arcane season two.
Oh, okay.
So definitely binged the first half of season two, and so now season two, part two is out. So watching that. I'm reading too many books. I just finished up. Oh my gosh, I don't remember the name of it. Book two in Zach Argyle's The
Oh,
Voice
Threadlight.
of War. Yes, Threadlight. So it was book two in the Threadlight trilogy. Just finished that up. Um, yeah, I'm reading a lot of books, but that was the one I just recently finished. I am hoping to start a song or a psalm for the Wild Built. Or
Oh, so
That
good.
is so beautiful. I love that book
Becky
so much.
Chambers is, you know what? That's a total vibe for you too.
Hmm.
Like
I'm
I
excited.
can
It's been on my
I
shelf
can
for a
see you really
while.
liking that one.
So good. I love that book so much. So enjoy all of those books and TV shows.
Yes.
Everyone else, check it out. And if you are so inclined, make sure you are following along with us. We're in the
Hmm.
month of December, so it's our wild month, but make sure you
Yeah.
guys are joining for next year as we dive into the Broken Earth trilogy, correct?
Yes, by
Okay.
N.K. Jemisin.
Yeah. So thank you again, Katie, for coming
Yeah,
on. We
thanks
really
so much.
appreciated it.
Thank you for having me again.
Bye. Thanks all.